Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland, and here I am in Dublin on Parnell Square. And behind me is 10 Parnell Square. Strictly speaking, 10 Parnell Square is this one's 10A. But so go back over a century, this was called Rutland Square, and indeed the lane around the corner is called Rutland Lane, retains its historical name. It was obviously renamed after we left the United Kingdom in honour of a nationalist politician. And so this building here was once called Fowler Hall. So it was named in honour of the Archbishop of Dublin, the Church of Ireland Archbishop Fowler, who was Archbishop from 1779 to 1801, if memory serves. Anyway, this was where several Orange lodges met. It was an Orange Hall. And by a very curious irony, or perhaps it's deliberate, when the Irish Volunteers were formed in January 1913, they formed more or less on the spot where I'm standing at a public meeting, the Rotunda Gardens, because the Rotunda Hospital is quite close to here, and it is rotund, as in round, a maternity hospital, maybe because these expectant mothers, when they were gravid, they were rotund themselves. I'm not sure if that's why they designed it that way. But anyway, so Orange lodges used to meet here, and there were Orange marches going on in Dublin until about 1936. Mainly they were going to get on the train to go to the north for the 12th of July, participate in marches in Northern Ireland, and the last time they tried to do that in 1936, they marched in their full regalia, orange collarettes and all bowler hats and their black suits, and they were pelted with eggs and rotten vegetables and so on, and they've not done it since. So Orange lodges still exist in Dublin, the Republic of Ireland. I'm told that Orangemen in Cork, Bandon used to have a few orange lodges, certainly in the late 19th century, and their building still stands, but Bandon's abandoned it. Bandon, they used to say, where even the pigs are Protestant, or the Derry of the West. Wouldn't it be more the Derry of the South? Notice they didn't say London Derry. But anyway, so looking back to the years in the run-up to the First World War, the Edwardian Crisis, we sometimes call it. All right, Edward I died in 1910, but anything up until the outbreak of the war, they often call it the Edwardian Crisis. So the Ulster Volunteer Force was formed in January 1913. People often say 1912 it was formed. That's actually wrong. It was discussed. And then several months later, the Irish Volunteers were formed more or less on this spot. So there were some UVF units outside Ulster, certainly as far south as Westmeath. And Dublin is a bit too far, so they said, okay, well, I'll call ourselves the Loyal Dublin Volunteers. And so they set themselves up. It was a city that was easily 20% Protestant back then. Now, not all Protestants are Unionists, and not all Catholics are nationalists, but that's the way to bet. Anyway, that was them. And then when the Easter Rising broke out, some of the crucial fighting was just down the street. That's O'Connell Street, which is the main drag in the whole of Ireland, the widest street in Ireland. So the LDV, they offered to assist the British Army, and indeed they did. Now, won't go through the events of the next few years, but anyway, in 1921 there was that truce, the 11th of July, between the Crown Forces and the IRA. The Irish Volunteers had renamed themselves Irish Republican Army. Officially they're still Oglaich na Héireann, as in Irish Volunteers, but more commonly known as the IRA. And they took over this building for the Orange Order. So obviously intimate links between the Orange Order and the UVF, or in this case, and between the Loyal Dublin Volunteers. They're not the same organisation. Quite a few Orangemen joined the UVF. Not all Orangemen were in it, were in the Orange Order were in the UVF, and not all UVF members were in the Orange Order. But clearly there was a link. And the IRA decided they'd take over this building, partly because they detested the Orange Order, because it's very unionist. There was some sectarianism in the IRA, and so they disliked the Orange Order for being a Protestant organisation, and so on. And they just said, well, we won't take property off Catholics so much, or Protestant nationalists. Well, let's take it off some loyalists, and they use it for their own purpose, some sort of an HQ. So the Orange Order, they lost Fowler Hall then, and they never regained it. It's now some sort of a youth organisation. And then in the 1930s, the GPO wasn't rebuilt until about 1926. In the 1930s, this became like the parcel department of the General Post Office. The GPO is just down the street. Of course, the GPO being really the focal point of the Easter Rising, the Irish Volunteers had seized it on the 24th of April 1916, because that was the nexus of communications. Telegrams went through there. I know letters did too, but they're slow. The Irish Volunteers didn't think to seize the telephone exchange. Now, I know the telephone was a relatively recent invention, and there were only about 1,000 phones in Ireland at the time, but they were in government offices and army barracks. So if the Irish volunteers had cut off the telephone exchange, then that would have really slowed the Crown Forces response, because then the Crown Forces units couldn't communicate within Ireland so much or contact Great Britain immediately. But there we go. So that's Fowler Hall, a little known part of Dublin history. Oh yes, I was saying in 1935 some workmen were doing a job there and they broke behind whatever wall it was, and they found lots of rifles and ammunition in pristine condition. They managed to keep it airtight, as in they were dry, would still have worked. So clearly the loyal Dublin volunteers at some point had secreted a cache of weapons there for later usage. They never actually put it to use. And I was just thinking, when the Irish volunteers met here in November 1913 for their foundation, was it deliberately to rile the Orangemen here, or was it more or less coincidence? I mean, I think of all the places they could have met in Dublin, it's surely not coincidental that it's directly opposite the main Orange Hall of the whole of Dublin. 11 lodges met there. I'm not sure there are other Orange Halls, as in buildings for other lodges. So Dublin will be a district. There'll be quite a few lodges to a district in some cases, but they don't have a building, so far as I know. There are a few Dublin Orangemen. I've even seen them posing with their orange collarettes and photos at Northumberland Street to commemorate the soldiers who were killed in the Easter Rising. And then right here is the plaque in Irish to say, yeah, and it's on this spot where the Irish volunteers were formed in November, 25th of November. Savon is November 1913. Savon's named after our ancient Irish sort of autumnal festival. Okay, so that's about enough from me. What else can I say? How scintillating it is. There's a Presbyterian church hard by. Perhaps they went there for some of their worship sometime. The Findlater Church, as it's commonly known, after the wealthy wine merchant who gave them money for it. Now, Presbyterians tend to believe in temperance, not really into alcohol consumption, so I'm surprised they consider that ethical to accept his tainted money. Findlater is a castle in Scotland, so I'm presuming that chap had distant North Britannic ancestry. And then the Gardens of Remembrance is really just behind this fence here, as in that's for the IRA. Well, they say for those who died for Irish freedom. It's not freedom. Those who died for Anglophobia or anti-Protestantism in many cases, as in to separate us from our kith and kin in Great Britain, with whom we have so many links, geographical, historic, political, social, economic, familial, and so forth, with whom we're in very many ways intermingled. Of course, virtually all of us have some English, Welsh, Scots, and ancestry. Having said that, maybe not the new Irish. By new Irish people, I mean like Irish Nigerians, Irish Chinese people, Irish Romanians. They're citizens too. They have an absolute right to be here. I completely accept that. As much right as I do. But there we go. So that's enough from me on this fascinating spot where there's been a real crossroad of ideologies and identities. This particular, seemingly unremarkable Georgian Square in central Dublin. Right, so please, I need donations to keep this channel going, so kindly dig deep. Very much appreciate your liberality. And remember, I do online lessons in history and politics, religious studies, geography, French, law, things like that. English literature, English language, English as a foreign language. I translate from French, Spanish, Italian, Romanian, German, and Russian. And I help people with essays, dissertations, theses, interview practice, elocution, and things of that nature. Right, toodle pip.